everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Rebecca Hines. I have the privilege of leading our Work AI Institute at Glean, which is our research center where we partner with leading experts to research and understand how AI is changing and transforming work. I'm thrilled to kick off this second season of guest lectures at Glean Academy. This is an interactive three-part series. This time it's inspired by our AI Transformation 100 report, which was our first report at the Work AI Institute. We published it back in December. Each lecture will feature a live discussion as well as a Q&A component. And today's episode is all about how AI adoption actually happens inside organization. So what works, what doesn't, and in particular, how do we move from dabbling with AI to real daily use of AI at scale? A couple quick housekeeping notes before we jump in. We're recording this session today, so you'll see the recording show up in your inbox after the event. We want this to be as interactive as you'd like it to be, so please ask questions as they come up. We ask you to please drop them in the Q&A tab rather than the general chat, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. So with that, let's get started. I'm so excited for you to meet our speakers. Shweta, why don't you kick us off and please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. I'm Shweta Puri, Marketing Technology and AI Operations Lead at Nextdoor, the neighborhood network connecting people to local communities across US and beyond. My background is at the intersection of marketing technology, operations, and more recently, enterprise AI. What that practically means is I'm not a researcher or a vendor. I'm a practitioner who has actually had to figure out how to make AI real inside a company with real budget constraints, real skeptics, and real workflows that don't pause for a pilot. So I've been a Glean customer and also a power user since our very early days with the platform, and it's been a year or so. I have somewhat unusual kind of vantage point here. I've lived both sides, the person rolling it out and also the person using it every day. So the dual perspective is what I'm hoping to bring to this conversation today. And I've also written this journey in Glean's blog, which I'll share as a follow-up resource. But the short version is that the technology was the easy part. Everything else is what we are here to talk about. I'll pass it back to Rebecca.
Wonderful, and I'm so excited for that blog. I'm sure we'll send it as a follow up. It's very insightful. Nicole, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Sterling. I am the co-founder of Women Defining AI. We are an AI and education company for women and non-binary individuals. We started several years ago as just a lunch and learn, and now we have a community that's nearly 2,000 members strong. And I've stepped away from the operational role within Women Defining AI because I have started my own AI company. This is one of the beautiful things that we've seen come out of our Women Defining AI community is women are getting new jobs, starting new companies. I happen to be a publicly elected official. I sit as Mayor Pro Tem for my community. And so my AI company has merged my subject matter expertise in local government with my technologist background. And so I come at it from not only someone who has had to drive AI amongst a community, but also uses AI herself, and also from a vendor perspective in how I interact with local governments. I also sit on the Gov AI Coalition, though, so I help local governments procure safe, ethical, and responsible AI all across the United States. So excited for the conversation today, and thank you for having me.
So today's session is all about how AI adoption really happens. And what we consistently see is most organizations don't struggle with access to AI. We often, think that AI is fundamentally an access problem. If we give employees this technology, they'll use it. The reality is not as such. And what we see is that conversion from real exposure to AI to real change, exposure to change is very difficult. How do you get this technology in the hands of people in a way that they're actively using it and using it to their benefit day to day? So, Shweta, one of the things we're seeing, I know you're seeing as well, is more and more organizations are establishing new roles that contain AI in the title, and your role is an example of that. Marketing technology and AI operations lead. Tell us a little bit about your role, what you're responsible for, and the significance of having AI in the title.
Yeah, I know. It's exciting times. Everybody wants to embrace AI in some way or the other, but I'll give you the perspective from my side. I've spent the 10 plus years kind of leading MarTech and operations, which is again not so glamorous connective tissue work of making tools actually work for people. So last year, I pivoted into AI operations and enablement at Nextdoor, and Glean was one of our very first platforms that we implemented. What I've come to appreciate about having AI in my title is that it's less about deep technical expertise and more about like being accountable for real outcomes, helping teams find meaningful ways to work differently with AI so it becomes a genuine part of how people do their jobs rather than just another tool that we invested in. So my role kind of sits squarely between business, technology, and people processes. And the goal is not to deploy more tools, it's to change the behavior or the foundation itself. Here's what that looked like a practice. We kind of started with 50 people pilot. We didn't just open a sign up link and hope for the best. We selected the champions who deeply understood the problem. And also, that meant from day one, everyone in the room had the context, conviction, and reason to care. So that deliberate curation made all the difference. And within a month, we had a strong monthly active user base and also quite a few daily active users. So we made the decision to roll it out broadly across the company to around 550 employees. And we are now at 500 plus users, 700 agents built, and almost at 82% stickiness in just 6 months of that broad rollout. So, yeah, I mean, phase one was getting people to use search was the entry point and not the destination. And finding answers was useful, but not transformational. So, phase two is where things actually started to get interesting when we moved from, I search from Glean through to like I work through Glean, which is all about agents, automations, AI embedded in the actual job and not like as a side note. So yeah, that's a high level journey so far at Nextdoor.
And that embedding AI in the flow of work is something we consistently hear is incredibly
Mhm.
important. It's sometimes referred to as the toggle tax, and this is something we unpack in our report as well. The reality is employees are often so overwhelmed, so overburdened that they're not wanting to switch to another platform or tool to use the technology. So, Shweta, one of the things I want to double click on in your journey is what we often see in organizations is what's sometimes referred to as the ambition execution gap. A lot of ambition associated with the technology, a lot of hype, but then when the rubber hits the road, not seeing that translate into real results. Are there aspects of your journey and Nextdoor's journey in which you've seen, you've run the training, you've run the pilots, broad rollouts, but there's been a gap in translating that, ambition and hard work and preparation into real results?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's a real challenge. And again, training alone almost never moves the needle. So I would say that as someone who has run a lot of it, and here's what I learned the hard way. Think about the last time you actually, changed how you work because of a company-wide announcement. Probably never. Like there are always announcements happening in the company, right? But if a peer you respect, someone in a role like you, pulled you aside and said, this saved me 2 hours last week, you'd probably try it pretty quickly and drop everything else, right? So AI adoption works exactly the same way. The signal has to come from someone with credibility in the room and not from a central team just kind of broadcasting to everyone. So the second unlock was the OKRs. When we embedded AI usage into how teams measure success, not as a side initiative, but as part of how they hit their goals. AI stopped being, overhead and started being how people actually worked. If your AI program is not touching the OKRs, it's still an optional thing, and people would consider that as optional even in their role. So I would say start from the basic, like embed AI into the OKRs or have people kind of drive more adoption that way.
Yeah, that's great insight for sure. Nicole, I want to turn to you. Have you seen this gap between ambition and execution as well in your work? And what do you think is driving it?
Yes, absolutely. There is always this disconnect between leaders who say we got to have that, we have to have AI, and yet they may not. And if they do provide training, that's great. We've seen a lot of companies across, whether it's women defining AI or even in my realm of local government, where they don't provide training, they don't provide guidance, and so everyone's left wondering, well, how do we do this thing? And I think one of the reasons that's driving it is because there is a lot of hype that, 2025 was all, like a lot about agents. And so everyone is asking agents, is this something I should know? And unfortunately, because there's like this pressure towards hype, folks internally, they're not doing some of the basic, just blocking and tackling of training, experimentation, usage. And so folks don't have a very good understanding of what they could get out of AI, what the tools are that they could use to their advantage. And so it creates what we like to call this jagged edge frontier. And it's this idea that some AI tools are very good at certain things, and so but then it doesn't do so good at other things, and it's also context specific to potentially your company and your role, and so it feels like AI has like this very jagged edge, really good at some things, maybe not so great, and then of course it's context specific. And so if you're not helping your folks internally to understand and to experiment out in public within the company, we just continue to chase this hype cycle. And so it feels like there is this execution ambition gap for sure.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that both of you have articulated is, the importance of the learning journey. And I often think that's underestimated in terms of, first having your employees know how to use AI in a search capacity, something that, most employees are already familiar with, then perhaps switching to assistants and understanding, okay, how do you interact with an intelligent assistant as part of your day-to-day work? And then, then the leap becomes agents. It's very difficult to go from zero to agent in a way that employees feel comfortable with. So I want to talk about champions, AI champions. I think this is a phrase that has become more and more common, and I think it's recognized as an important strategy, not just the top-down change, but how do you activate these AI champions and influencers within an organization? Shweta, how do you identify champions? What are you looking for in identifying these people who can help lead the charge around AI adoption?
Yeah, of course. Champions at our company were not, who you would expect naturally. They weren't always the most technical people. They were rather the curious people who were cross-functional generalists and who were willing to try out things, fail, and come back with a better version. So in our pilot, champions actually picked the participants, so they had the skin in the game. So they weren't like, assigned a role, they chose it. So the ownership mattered. And after almost like 6 to 7 months of working with these folks now, in fact, longer, including the pilot, it's almost been a year, you would exactly know what content to give someone depending on where they are in the journey. So a new Glean user always needs a different kind of a nudge than someone who's already built, say, 5 or 6 agents. So we also built infrastructure for champions to succeed. A private Slack channel where anyone could share ideas, showcase some wins and exchange tips. Power users definitely, influence other employees at the company. And then we also started with recurring office hours, which were not really just presentations, but they were more, collaborative debugging sessions, bite-sized updates in company bulletins. And we also gamified it, spotlighting the top agent builders, for example, most active chat users, most creative workflows. And that made success visible and repeatable. So our mantra became like, bring AI to the work, don't bring employees to another tool. So embed AI where the employees actually work already.
That's great. And for the folks just tuning in, we're chatting about AI champions and the importance of AI champions within the organization. It's something we see consistently as well. Marrying that important top-down change with activating your AI influencers and champions, and recognizing that they might not be who we think they are. And we consistently see they don't tend to be highly technical. They don't tend to be at the top of the org chart, but they have big influence in encouraging other people around them to adopt. Nicole, I'm curious, from your perspective, what are the characteristics you see in these AI champions? Do they have a certain persona or footprint that tends to show up time and time again?
Yeah, I would agree with Shweta when she says, these are usually just curious early adopters that are cross-functional generalists. That actually describes me and Helen, the other co-founder of Women Defining AI, to a T. And just like you had mentioned, it's oftentimes they're not always the most technical, but they have the ideas. They know how their workflows, and they can look at AI and say, oh, this could probably work here. And that's one of the other characteristics that we've seen time and time again with some of these champions, is that they're power users that are willing to just try, fail, talk about that failure, what worked, what didn't, and then keep going. This is very much kind of the ethos that we built our community around, is just put it out there. Just try, fail multiple times until you can kind of find something that works. And so that's actually one of the other things that we see, is that they can apply solutions to different problems instead of just keeping AI to a single lane. It's like, oh no, I only use AI for this over here. No, they're constantly applying solutions to different problems. And so that's really exciting to watch, even in my own experience, right? In terms of a champion, because many other industries are just emerging with AI, and local government happens to be one of them. They're not as forward as the private sector, but they also don't want to be left behind. And I'm actually leading a session later today about vibe coding in local government. You wouldn't think many local governments are interested in that, or it's pushing the boundaries a little too much, but it's speaking very much to this idea that they are the subject matter experts. They know how work flows, and what if we put a tool in their hands that allowed them to create the thing that they usually have to rely on expensive consultants for, or other folks to bring their idea to life. And so it's great to see that happening in different sectors. And again, it always comes back to who's willing and who has the idea.
And I think that's one of the most fascinating shifts we're seeing across the board, is how the product development life cycle is rapidly changing in terms of being able to rapidly prototype much easier, and being able to demonstrate a proof of concept where previously you were relying on these experts. It's quite exciting, but it also, opens up some risk for the organization, and needing to be intentional about how you manage that as well. I love that you touched on cross-functional workers as well, and those being great candidates for AI champions. It's something that we consistently see as well, because in part, they're not just building for themselves, they're thinking more holistically about the organization. And I think that's, often a strategy we'll recommend to organizations is, don't just, find the people who are curious. That's a very important group, but find the people who span different functional groups and teams as well.
Yeah.
So I want to switch to measurement. This is very challenging in the era of AI. How do you measure success? How do you measure effectiveness? Nicole, I'd like to start with you. How do you think leaders should be thinking about measurement right now?
Yeah, this has been a conversation that's happened for a couple of years now, because I think the first gut reaction is, well, how do I measure the success of this thing? And especially with AI being new and new to our behaviors, folks have really tried to figure out a way to successfully measure it. And we don't know that there are really any perfect metrics yet. It's still mostly about usage. It's about building habits. As we've already talked about, it's about understanding how work may shift or change. And so what good looks like actually depends on, the job that's to be done with AI. I have the privilege of working in different industries and different sectors. And, at first it was always about the productivity metric. It's like, yeah, but then if you are just trying to get so many hours back there, and if you just take on more administrative work, is that really helping the organization? And that is something that I've seen echoed across multiple industries. And so then it becomes about, okay, well, what's those higher order goals that we could be going toward, whether that's, an overarching higher goal of, in local government, it might be something like, maybe citizen satisfaction or something like that. But again, like, folks are still trying to figure out like how that attaches, like how does it all connect? So it really, for me, it's been very contextual. It really depends.
Function to function.
Yeah.
We see team to team anchoring in those existing business KPIs, I think is a hallmark of what we see work, given how malleable and flexible the technology is.
Yeah.
Now, closely related to the conversation around metrics is this phenomenon that's sometimes referred to as AI theater. Using the technology to use the technology. There's a lot of pressure right now to show you're using AI, show you're investing in AI, and building that capability within your organization. Nicole, how do you see AI theater show up day to day? What are some of those telltale signs?
So I've said that I get to see across industries, and it's always when I hear that somebody's, oh, we're using ChatGPT on like a superficial level. And the real kicker for me is when they say that, oh, it's the free version. And I'm just like, okay, that means that it's just a lot of hand wavy. It's a lot of theater. You don't really have that grounded strategy. And like I said, it pops up everywhere. And so I think externally, CEOs make a lot of big statements about AI. But employees don't actually know what it means for their day to day. And they're not prioritizing the training or the experimentation in public. And they can just say, oh, well, we're using ChatGPT. But again, like all the things that we've talked about, whether that's the training, understanding how it works in the workflows, are we failing at it? We want to hear like those failing stories just as much as the success stories. And so, if folks don't have that guidance and it really is just a bunch of hand waving internally, like people just lack the sense of proficiency. They don't know what good AI looks like for their role, for their team's role. And that's just where it's very frustrating to hear companies still engaging in that way, just so they can say they're doing AI.
And I think one way to combat this is, Shweta, what you were discussing earlier in terms of the importance of embedding AI in the flow of work. And I want to return to that conversation because I think it is very relevant here. Can you walk us through one workflow where AI went from a side project, maybe more of that theater and talk as opposed to action, to it being deeply embedded in the flow of work, in the day-to-day work of employees?
Yeah, of course. The way I kind of think about is our agents or our automations that we've built with AI or Glean so far. They fall under like two buckets. One is like evergreen or always on kind of agents, and then the second bucket I would call it as seasonal, and both are essential. evergreen, always on kind of agents would be answering the same questions that never go away. And a good example here is, for example, like the IT help agent is a highly used agent in our company. We already had a Slack channel where employees asked IT questions, right? The problem was not that the problem was actually here that the answers were buried in the scroll history and not discoverable in that moment when people are looking for. So every question felt new. And obviously, there was earlier a human interacting or answering these questions. However, we put a Glean agent in that existing channel, and now it's the first line answer. It deflects repeated questions, pulls from historical, databases, docs, and routes only the genuinely new issues to humans. So we didn't create a new process here. We made the existing one smarter. And the same principle kind of applies to another agent that we are soon rolling out. Instead of pinging a data analyst, and this is called a data help agent, where employees will now be able to ask natural language questions and get answers pulled directly from Databricks environment in our case. And that's a saving for both the people asking and also the team that used to field those requests earlier. So these are a couple of examples of evergreen or always on kind of agents. Then there are these seasonal agents that we experimented with recently. And, because these use cases are kind of built in, they have deadlines and captive audience. Enrollment was a perfect example here. Every year, people team gets flooded with same questions about plans, options, deadlines, workday actions, etc. So our the benefits agent named to feel approachable, or not just employees get clarity instantly and get pointed answers right away instead of waiting for an HR response. And another seasonal sort of an example is a self-performance review agent, which we launched ahead of the review cycle. Who likes to write, their self-reviews every quarter or every 6 months? Employees could only ask the agent to structure their assessment, provide examples, and and get help on how to frame the impact right at the moment they needed. So that those were some of the impactful agents that we recently started using, and they've shown impact significantly.
That's great. And there's a comment in the chat from Joshua that I think speaks to this really well as well. We often think that AI agents should do everything. They should automate the complete process. And what you've done so well is you've thought very carefully about the division of labor, for the aspects of work, for example, that are routine and there's precedent for, delegate that to an agent. The novelty in terms of new tasks, new asks from employees, that's a uniquely human pursuit often. And I think that division of labor, it's not easy, but I think it's important when we think about agents in particular and workflows.
Yep.
So I want to wrap up with one final question, and Shweta, I'll ask you this one first. There's a lot of pressure to move quickly with AI now, and I think there's a lot of fear of going too slow and feeling behind. What is one concrete action you'd recommend folks take in the next week or next month in terms of taking that extra step to move their AI adoption forward?
Yeah, if there's one thing I want you to walk away with today is it's not basically it's don't start with a strategy deck. Start with one workflow your team already does, and make it smarter. That's it. That's the whole playbook. Find the friction, drop AI in it, pick one metrics to prove what's working, and then let your teams pull it forward. That's how we went from a 50% pilot to 700 plus agents, not by planning it all upfront, but by following the signals one workflow at a time. So we need to divide and conquer, and not everything can be implemented on day one. So I promise you, once your team feels that they get 20 minutes back, the next question would be: should we use AI, or should we, where can we use AI better? So basically embed the AI in the processes themselves that already exist.
That's great advice. Nicole, how about you? What's one action that you'd recommend every organization take as part of their AI adoption journey right now?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I have my own AI company, and I am typically, because I'm essentially the customer and the subject matter expert, I oftentimes will prototype out new feature sets and then hand off to my engineering team to put into production. And I tell the story as an example for like the takeaway. I was prototyping basically an ADU analyzer. So ADUs are accessory dwelling units. They're a great way to jumpstart affordable housing initiatives within jurisdictions. And as I started to build it, I was like, killed that, session, started up another one because I'm vibe coding, and tried multiple ways on how to solve it. And ultimately what came out of it was a new idea that I hadn't even thought of beforehand, because after I kind of built a prototype of where could these detached accessory dwelling units go in one of my trial municipalities or cities. And then I realized, what would actually make this great is if you could do a policy analyzer on this and basically adjust policy metrics. So, hey, what if we reduce the residential footprint for these parcels to 5,000, and we made it so that any ADU could be on a 5,000 square foot parcel, because every jurisdiction is different, and started to do some toggles there. And so I was like, oh my goodness, that's actually the coolest part. And that's not what I intended or started with. So my takeaway for you is to take one reoccurring problem and solve it 6 different ways with AI as a team exercise. Hopefully you'll have some of those failure points, because maybe 1, 2, and 3 didn't work out well, but maybe by the time you get to a 6th version, there's something interesting, and maybe something interesting came out of it that you didn't initially intended. So 6 different ways to solve one problem and align on the best pattern and make that a habit.
I love that, and so concrete, and it aligns with, overwhelmingly there's evidence to suggest that we're more creative, we're more innovative when we have a greater quantity of ideas to work with as well. And I think that very much feeds into that. So 6 different ways, I think that's something we can all put into practice. Okay, so I want to spend the last 10-ish minutes answering some questions here. There are some great ones that have come in. I want to go to Bob's question first. This is a great one. We touched on it around AI theater. Do you have clear examples or anecdotes that you can share in terms of AI theater showing up in practice? Nicole or Shweta, does anything come to mind that other organizations might be experiencing as well in terms of this AI theater? What are some signs to look for?
Yeah, I because we talked to a lot of different organizations, and I'll come back to that example of somebody at the top says, we got to have AI, we got to do AI, we got to do this thing called AI. And then there's no direction on how to do it. There's no training. There's no setup for experimentation. It's just like, we got to do AI. It's really important. And there's a lot of hand waving. And it's like, to do the thing, to get better at the thing. And it's not concrete. And we've talked about this throughout the session, that you can only really have an understanding of your company, your particular context, your teams, if you start to experiment and you are very deliberate about it. So that is just, it consistently comes up like that across every industry I speak to.
Shweta, anything to add in your view from your experience?
Yeah, so it looks like, a team that updates their workflows when they find a better way, shares what they learn, and treats AI output as a starting point and not a final answer. So keep experimenting. It's just a mindset, not a tool set, I would say, that needs to change. So keep experimenting. That's how we learn. Everybody is learning. And yeah, don't feel shy of, the failures that you come across, and you learn from there. Yeah.
Great. Now, here's another one around vendor guidance, and how do you think about integrating these disconnected AIs? Often we'll hear the phrase toggle tax, the massive tax that employees have to pay as they toggle between all the apps, all the tabs, all the tools that they feel they need to use at work. So in a world where every vendor has an AI solution, good or not, is there guidance around how do you integrate these disconnected AIs? And as a follow-up, how do you fill in the gaps between the vendor AI solutions? Workflows is one approach. How do you think about this? How do you think about this integration puzzle and problem?
I can speak from a local government, because I literally was just on a call about an hour ago talking about this dilemma. So it's very interesting. What we are starting to see happen across local governments is that local governments are starting to demand of their vendors to have open portability and integration mechanisms within the policies that they are striking with these vendors, because we are seeing it there too. There's just this angst around, oh my gosh, how do I get you to talk over here? Vendors like myself are also having to be open to that, because there's also, acquisitions happening of young GovTech companies of, hey, I want you to, connect over here with this because you have a very specific wedge that you're going for, and I need it to communicate over here. So, but the other, so that is a thing. And so in the local government sphere, we're asking for those open data protocols. But the other thing I would say is that, and we've kind of touched on it here, is that when we're looking at a workflow, having the serious conversation as if that entire workflow is still needed. Or does work shift in an intelligent way? And maybe the gap that you're identifying is no longer a gap that is needed, and or shifts into something else. That's one of the beautiful things with AI, is we are rethinking how work is being done. So just be open to that as well.
It's great advice. Great advice for sure. One of the, aspects I think that is also important is recognizing that probably we're going to live in a world where employees are going to need to use different models and different tools. It's no longer, a single tool that's going to dominate. I think it's pretty clear that is the case as models are leapfrogging. And so developing the infrastructure that allows you to tap into different models and tools, I think is important as well.
Yeah. And it's not that hard to do from a technical standpoint.
Shweta, did you have anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would pretty much kind of summarize, what we've been talking about, and it kind of applies to this question also directly. Our answer has been to, stop thinking about individual AI tools and start thinking about the workflows that need to happen. And then figure out which tool handles which step. So at Nextdoor, we use Glean as that connective tissue or that unified layer. And it indexes across all our systems. So regardless of which vendor AI a team uses, the knowledge layer always is unified or orchestrated through Glean. For the gaps, the handoffs between tools, the steps that no vendor covers, that's where Glean agents and workflow automations come in. And you can actually build lightweight agents that bridge these two systems that probably don't have AI capabilities yet. And then triggers on a condition, handles that middle mile, that AI vendors don't touch yet. So the key mindset shift is don't ask which AI tool we use, ask what needs to happen and in what order and where that friction point is. And then map tools to the steps, not the other way around, I would say.
It's really insightful. And I think it ties back to the AI theater conversation around, exactly. I find the more you're talking about AI, the more it's an indication that maybe it's more on the theater side. The more you're talking about work and workflows that are powered by AI, I think that's a good sign that, it's real, it's moving work forward.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great question from Stephanie here around small businesses. Do you think about small business adoption of AI differently than, say, an enterprise? And she's describing a situation where there's pressure to move quickly with the technology. You've read about it in the news or an article, and you're feeling a sense of behind. Do you think about that differently as a small business versus a larger, more established organization?
I run a small business, so it's and it could be a little bit different for me because I am fluent in AI. So I just want to point out that nuance. But as a small business owner, I am looking at every darn thing I could possibly automate and or vibe code to just give me the ability to still focus as being a business owner. And so, is it different? Enterprises are also looking for those opportunities in order to, get better productivity and, help with those pinch points and everything. I want to say it feels heavier as a small business owner because everything is on your shoulders. You don't have the ability to just say, hey, marketing. I mean, one of these days when I have a full marketing team, but it's much more difficult. And so, but I would say it's still the same protocol. Find that pain point, find that workflow that is redundant and that you just hate doing, and use that as a first step in automating your way towards a little bit more, less heaviness and more lightweightness. So
That's great advice.
wow.
Maybe we'll end. We have a couple minutes. I love this question from Sylvia. It's a question we get often in terms of, we're seeing AI being democratized or commoditized and accessible to everyone in theory. In this world, what is the source of competitive advantage? What is your moat in a world where the technology is being democratized and commoditized?
Shweta, if you want to speak first for this one, go for it.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking about it. It's a good one. Yes, the tools are getting democratized, and yeah, businesses kind of again, it depends on the size of the company. Smaller businesses, to your previous question, have better advantage because they can move faster. They don't have any, procurement cycles or change management committee. It becomes a little bit more difficult to bring in these tools and drive adoption if the company is of a bigger size, because you have to go through a lot of processes. So yes, I mean, I would say the approach would again depend on the business model, the company you are part of, or where you are trying to implement these AI tools. It definitely depends on the size of teams. And my advice for example, small teams would be skip the pilot and just pick your most painful recurring task and automate it this week. However, if it's an enterprise level company, you basically follow a certain governance process, because public companies versus private companies also have their own landscape in terms of security, governance, and so all of that needs to be taken care of whenever or wherever you are implementing AI, would be my first thought.
Great. Well, I think that's a great Nicole. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
love to
I gotta
hear.
say this one.
Yes.
Because I am a business owner, I'm a tech company. Your data schemas are where your moat is. Not only your data schemas, but any very nuanced insight that you are able to deliver that required a lot of my input as a subject matter expert in order to create, that is still patentable and it is still a moat. So don't forget that.
I love it. So important. Well, thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I learned a lot. I think our audience did as well. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.